Traumatic events as a catalyst for positive growth. When discussing mental health, personal growth, or nearly any other form of psychology, it is impossible not to bring up trauma. In all its myriad forms, from vicarious trauma to post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, it seems almost as if all other forms of mental health issues are but compounded symptoms of one form of trauma or another. Even in expert circles we hear things like trauma is a word that gets thrown around a lot, but rarely defined with any practical outcome in mind. What does it even mean? 1. In this article we'll explore the definition of trauma, its effects on personal growth and how you can build post-traumatic growth and resilience. What is a traumatic event? Trauma is a word often used in the context of post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, but what does this mean? While PTSD can be triggered by many different circumstances, it's commonly associated with war or other traumatic events. However, trauma can also occur from something as simple as a car accident or even being bullied at school. Trauma refers to an event or experience that is so overwhelming or life-threatening that it leaves an individual feeling helpless and scared. It's an overwhelming sensation that impairs the cognitive processing of the individual. For some people, even a single traumatic event can be too much to handle and can cause lasting psychological damage. Trauma can have different triggers or causes, and the effects can be long-lasting. An article from Psychology Today notes, trauma is typically seen as a negative in our lives, holding us back from having achieved some other goal or life. It often seems as if the traumatic event is used as the reason that life hasn't panned out the way we wanted it to. The point of this article is the exact opposite. It posits that trauma can be a force of good in our lives, driving us to change and/or improve. To overcome trauma, we often need to face our fears and work through our pain. Post-traumatic growth positive psychology can motivate us to become stronger and more resilient. By working through our trauma, we can grow into better individuals, with a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us, experiencing just a few of the benefits of post-traumatic growth. How can a traumatic event lead to growth? One of the most powerful aspects of trauma is that it can act as a catalyst for growth and developing personal strength, resilience and post-traumatic growth. When we experience something traumatic, it can force us to confront aspects of ourselves that we have been avoiding, oftentimes leading us to experience growth, positive change, and/or some other positive growth model, be it spiritual growth, or creative growth, of even just a positive psychological change. This can be a difficult process, but it can also be incredibly rewarding. Jungian shadow work is one of several techniques that can be used to facilitate this type of post-traumatic growth. It involves exploring the darker aspects of our personality and facing the fears and doubts that we have been hiding from. It requires overcoming certain forms of learned helplessness and engaging in a constant post-traumatic growth inventory process to gauge momentum and progress. Traumatic experiences can cause us to develop new skills and perspectives that we wouldn't have otherwise. For example, after experiencing traumatic stress, some people may become more compassionate and understanding of others' experiences. Others may become more resilient and able to cope with difficult situations. Trauma can also help us to connect with others in a more authentic and honest manner to form stronger relationships. It can help us gain a better appreciation life. Overall, trauma can be a catalyst for personal growth and development. Starting your journey. When deciding to pursue recovery goals for yourself, I would suggest starting with a question or two to help zero in on and define what your goals are. A question like "What are 3 key characteristics of post-traumatic growth?" would be a good example. An understanding of the characteristics of emotional response of post-traumatic stress and what to expect in your journey would be highly recommended. The first step in developing a post-traumatic growth plan is to identify what you want. The point of this exercise is not to determine the perfect path, it's simply to find out where you're at now and where you'd like to be. Once you have a clear understanding of what your goals are, it's time to start planning how to achieve them. There are many different techniques for post-traumatic growth and resilience, but one my personal favorite is the previously mentioned archetypal Jungian shadow work. Let's discuss a few examples of post-traumatic growth. The role of self-compassion in traumatic events and related growth. When individuals experience traumatic events or live a particularly traumatic life, they may feel like they are alone in their pain. This isolation can lead to feelings of shame and guilt, further compounding our traumatic experience in what is known as vicarious trauma. However, research has shown that many people who have experienced traumatic events report growth in the aftermath of their experience. This growth can be attributed to a range of factors, but one of the biggest is self-compassion. Self-compassion involves being kind and understanding toward oneself, especially in challenging times or in connection to traumatic stress. It involves accepting one's flaws and mistakes and recognizing that everyone makes mistakes sometimes. The act of moving from trauma to post-traumatic growth can be enhanced by cultivating self-compassion. When individuals feel supported and understood by others, they are more likely to engage in positive psychology to explore their own resilience and post-traumatic growth. Doing so from a positive psychological place allows them to delve into aspects of their traumatic experience. Research, check links like Google Scholar, has shown that self-compassion is linked with a number of benefits, including greater psychological well-being, spiritual growth, and decreased levels of stress. The role of relationships in traumatic events and growth. Post-traumatic growth is the phenomenon of individuals growing in ways that they never could have imagined after experiencing critical stress incidents. While much of the focus on post-trauma-related growth has been on the individual's recovery experience, researchers are beginning to explore the specific role of relationships in this process. In particular, relationships play a key role in assisting individuals' cognitive processing as they undergo their journey of growth. Specifically, relationships provide social support and connection, both of which are known to be beneficial for individuals who are going through recovery for a traumatic life experience. This support can come from friends, family members, or other important people in the individual's life, such as their certified substance abuse counselor, or certified peer support specialist in a professional recovery setting. The most important consideration from a trauma-informed care (TIC) perspective is that it is someone who the individual has chosen and feels that connection with. It is thought that having someone to rely on can help individuals feel more positive about their situation and reduce their feelings of stress and anxiety. One study looked at how participants' quality of relationship changed after they experienced a traumatic event. Results showed that relationship quality improved for those who actively engaged in their recovery and/or pursued higher levels of post-traumatic growth therapy. Another study found that social support was positively associated with post-traumatic growth among cancer survivors. These findings suggest that relationships can be an important source of support during times of trauma and growth. Positive psychology and spirituality in traumatic events and growth. This process of recovering from trauma can trigger and is often marked by positive changes in attitude or behavior, and it often leads to a greater sense of personal strength and resilience. That's not to say that all survivors are suddenly happy, healthy and optimistic. Many are left feeling vulnerable, angry or depressed for a long time after trauma. But when they recover from the experience of trauma, their outlook on life changes for the better. While the role of spirituality in trauma-related growth has not been extensively studied, there are some indications that it may play a significant role. Researchers have found that the sense of spirituality can provide a protective factor in the healing process. They have been able to show that trauma survivors who report high levels of spirituality are less likely to experience more severe forms of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. When faced with difficult traumatic life circumstances, some people find that their growth model of spiritual beliefs and practices gives them the strength to cope. While for others, these beliefs may be a source of comfort during tough times but no longer serve them after a certain stage of personal development. Either way, experts believe that having some sort of spiritual connection can provide people with a sense of meaning and purpose during their recovery process. Ultimately, trauma provides a fulcrum for, and is in itself, a time of change. As we recover, our perspective on the world also changes. We begin to see things more clearly and with more depth than before. This process can be painful at times, but it's important for growth to occur. But the opposite would be stagnation and a never-changing sameness. Studies have shown that those who engage in positive psychology, or some sort of spiritual activity, tend to have better physical and mental health outcomes. It is also through engaging in recovery or getting mental health services that you will likely encounter your first post-traumatic growth questionnaire. These can be useful for taking your post-traumatic growth inventory or keeping a post-traumatic growth worksheet. You can also look at post-traumatic growth inventory scoring and interpretation of these materials. What are a few more benefits of traumatic events and growth? So far, in this article we have discussed how trauma can be a catalyst for growth in the individual. But this is also true on a societal or social level. It can help people to address their vulnerabilities and develop new skills. It can also lead to positive change in the way people think and behave. It can help someone learn and develop new skills, strengths, and perspectives. It can also lead to change in one's personal beliefs and attitudes. The experience of trauma can ultimately be transformational, life-saving, even awe-inspiring. The individual who pushes through, perseveres, and overcomes the challenges in their way, is quite often the hero of the story. For some, traumatic experiences can be the impetus they need to take charge of their lives and make changes. For others, it can be the awakening that leads to a greater understanding and appreciation of themselves and the world around them. Trauma can lead to healing, which then allows for fresh beginnings and new opportunities. What good can come of trauma? I would argue that it is only through our trauma that we can see, find and appreciate what good is. There are many benefits to trauma. It can be a catalyst for growth in the individual, and on a societal level. Trauma can encourage people to take charge of their lives, confront their fears, and make positive changes. It can also lead to healing, which then allows for fresh beginnings and new opportunities. It can force individuals to confront their innermost fears and vulnerabilities, and it can motivate them to become their best selves. Trauma is not always a negative experience. It can also be a source of strength and resilience. If you are struggling with trauma, don't give up, there is hope for healing and growth. No matter how bleak it may seem while in the midst of it, the way out is there if you are ready to do the work. Seek out professional help if necessary, and allow yourself to be open to the possibility of change. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you found it informative and useful.